Right. We're getting close to the end of this report, but there's still a few more things to go through. And frankly, this one, the next one, is pretty much the big reveal, the one that makes up for all the time you spend building a report to when it starts to pay you back in big time saved, the refresh button. Right at the beginning of this report, we talked about the dataset supporting this report being replacement rather than incremental. This means that to update this PBIX, we need to replace the supporting dataset with a new dataset. Let's have a look at that. We'll need to go into File Explorer next. I've now switched back to File Explorer, and I'm back where our datasets are that support the Power BI report that we've been working with. Make sure you can do the same. Okay, right now our PBIX is connected to this report here called Invoice Dataset. We're going to replace that dataset, first with the information from the Invoice Dataset 2 folder, and then from the Invoice Dataset 3 folder. Job 1 then. Always a good idea to save the reports that you're no longer using in case someone asks you to recreate a particular version of a report that they've relied on. To do that, simply create a new Old Reports folder. Right, we can then copy our current invoice dataset and paste it into this Old Reports folder. Next, I'll go into the Invoice Dataset 2 folder, copy the dataset that's in that folder, and that one's also called Invoice Dataset, and then come back to this folder and paste it in place. Right, our computer's now asking us, do we want to replace the file that's got the same name as the one we're pasting? And you absolutely do want to replace it, okay? And it's got to be exactly the same name. Same capitalizations, same spaces, same name. So what we've just done is we've taken the file out of the Invoice Dataset 2 folder and pasted it into this folder and replaced the file called Invoice Dataset. Right, let's skip back to Power BI. Right, we've changed our dataset. Now it's time to refresh our Power BI file to see what happens. Now to refresh the file in the report view, or in the table view, or in the relationships view for that matter, go to the Home tab and then find smack bang in the middle of the ribbon, the refresh button. Now, we just then need to wait while Power BI refreshes the connection. It looks for new data, carries out all the steps in Power Query, and refreshes the visualization. Shouldn't take too long. The report's pretty small. Right then, report refreshed. We know, of course, that the report is refreshed because the total spend in our card visual has increased substantially. It was 69.4 million. It's now 86.2 million. And because if we go down to the invoice visual and click on the invoice date, we can see that we now have May information in here as well, whereas before we only had January to April data. How easy was that? Replace one file, click a button, and that's it, job done. No need to redo all the steps in Power Query, do any copy and pasting jobs or anything like that, just 2 simple steps. As you might come over all curmudgeonly and say, well, I could have recreated that report really quickly each day or week or month or whatever in Excel. And yes, this one, yeah, probably you could have done. But consider the following. It's too easy making a mistake when you recreate a report. You miss steps or accidentally don't include all the data. Power BI is likely to be much more accurate. You don't need to go through all the steps each month, and that means you don't need to remember the steps, freeing brain space for more profitable activities. You'll always get the same consistent report as the visuals of the report don't change. You can avoid the Excel row limit trap, and we'll come to that in report 3. Business continuity is much easier. Explaining to someone that they simply need to replace a file, then click refresh to keep a report going if you're away or have left the business is about as straightforward as it gets. This report might have been easy, but what about when you want to bring multiple data sets together, like in the next report, or you have folders of files and you have to bring them all together and make them act the same way, like in report 3, or when your data is in a really unhelpful format, like in report 4, and you have folders of files and you have to bring all the information together. That's when Power BI really starts to come into its own. I have seen numerous reports take multiple days and even weeks of repetitive manual work out of a department's time schedule, replacing time-consuming work with a simple replace data and refresh report strategy. There's also other reports too, but we'll come to those a little later on. Now, remember, right at the beginning of this course, I said that I was deliberately going to cause problems for you in these reports. Well, I couldn't do it right off the bat with the first refresh, because then how would you know what it was meant to look like? But there's going to be one coming with our next refresh. So let's go back to File Explorer and refresh the file again. Okay, let's bring the file from Invoice Dataset 3 into play. We're going to copy the file out of the Report 3 folder and put it in this folder here. If you're wondering why we don't save the invoice dataset into our old reports, we don't need to. It's already in Invoice Dataset 2. Right, let's go back to Power BI and see what happens when we try and refresh this time. Again, on the Home tab, I'll go to the Refresh button in the Query section of the ribbon. Right, there it is. There's our problem. Big biohazard warning signs in place to tell us there's a problem. And what's the error message that we can see? It says, Invoice Dataset, that's the table name. The column invoice number of the table wasn't found. So just to be clear here, Power BI has not refreshed. This warning sign tells it that there's a problem that we need to go and sort out, and we can't refresh this file with this dataset until we go and sort out that problem. Now, the vast majority of errors that you will come across are refresh errors. These errors happen because a dataset that you've added in or you've used to replace another dataset does not have exactly the same file structure as Power Query is expecting when you set up all of the original steps. What we need to do is go and figure out what it is that's got Power BI in a bit of a fix. Power BI has given us a clue here actually. Well, much more than a clue that it used to give when I first started with Power BI. So let's start there. The column invoice number of the table wasn't found. So let's get back into Power Query to work out more. Right, we're now back in Power Query and we've got a big yellow banner with the same warning that we saw in the report view. Power Query can't find the column invoice number. Now, having listened to the error message and got back into Power Query, the first thing to do is find the step where the error has arisen. Now, I know straight away that the error is in this step, the change type step, and I know that because otherwise the yellow banner would have had a go to error button in the top right hand corner. And that would have taken us, when clicked, to the step where the error had occurred. As it hasn't done that, then the error is somewhere in this step. The next thing we need to do is understand a little bit of the code that Power Query has used to create these steps. As we said in the pre-course learning, the formula bar is where the code behind each step is hidden. Now, it isn't the time for tons of detail on how the code works, but we can see that each section of text is in a different color. The bits in red are the bits that we're interested in, as these are the column headers. And as you can see, we have the names of all of the columns in the dataset. This step is trying to change the data type of all the columns, and it's named each of the columns in the dataset individually to assign a data type to it. The problem is that it hasn't found a column in our dataset called invoice number, but it's got instructions to find that column and convert it to type text. So the next thing for us to do is go, okay, well, what has it found? If it hasn't found that column, what has it found? So to do that, we need to go back into the previous step to find out what Power Query can see. Okay, interesting. Where we'd expect all our headers to be, what we've got actually is the actual data. The headers are no longer there. So what's going on? What we probably should do now is start at the top, the source step, and then work our way down to see what's going on. So at the top, we have the source step, and here we can see in the preview screen that there are headers. And look, invoice number is there, right at the top on the left-hand side. But our step at the bottom says that Power BI can't find that header, so something's gone a bit peculiar at some point in the steps. Let's dig deeper. If I go down to change type, nothing really happens, nothing that odd here. Okay, next step I think is going to be where it all goes wrong. Right, this is the removed top rows step. And do you remember why we put this step in? Let's go back to our first data set and have a look. Right, here's the first file that we connected to, the original invoice data set. And it had a couple of rows at the top showing the date of running the invoice report and the user ID of the person who ran it. There's then a blank row and then headers. We removed those top rows because we didn't need them, and we needed to get to the point that we could put the column titles, which were 4 rows down, into the header row. So let's have a look at the new dataset we've just put into Power BI. And there we go. Straight away, we can see that the report structures are different. The rows that were there at the top of the file that we first connected to Power BI are not there in the file we've just used to refresh Power BI. Now, this means that when Power BI tries to refresh itself and runs through the various Power Query steps, it will eventually remove the top 3 rows that it finds. In this file, that means that it will take out the header row and then the 2 rows underneath it. So let's close this file then to go back to Power BI to show this. Right, I'm just going to click back to the change type step a moment, as this is the last step that the preview screen will mirror the Excel file we just looked at. Okay, we can now see the headers in the first row, then 2 rows of invoice data directly underneath. No rows yet removed, and invoice 14,486 is still in row 4. That's important, remember that. We'll next move on to the remove top row step. Okay, this step took the top 3 rows out of the dataset, which means that Inv 14486 is now in the top row, and we've lost the headers and 2 rows of data from the dataset. We then move to the remove bottom row step. No change to what we're doing at the top of the dataset, so move to the next step, which should be promoted headers. This step then moves Inv 14486 into the headers row, which means that instead of the actual column titles that we in Power BI have been hoping for, we've got something entirely different. Power BI then moves on to the next step, which is the change type step, and realizes that none of the titles that are specifically referenced in the change type step are in this dataset, as they were removed as part of removed top rows. It then throws a wobbly. So you can see, even on a file as simple as this, how a simple change in the structure of a file can result in everything going a bit pear-shaped. Now, this is important, as having this understanding is pretty essential to the general ongoing battle to continue building robust reports that refresh unhindered year-round. No matter though, things will go wrong, and we have to get used to sorting them out. So first we have to understand why it went wrong. Why did the file structure change? This report was meant to be fresh out of a system, which means that either the system has changed the layout of the report, or alternatively, someone else has got to the report and removed the top 3 rows. Might have been trying to be helpful. Now, understanding which of these options is necessary in deciding how to fix the problem. Now, if it's option 1 and the system has changed the report layout, then we can expect any such invoice report in future that comes out of that system to be in the same format. That means then that we need to change Power BI to compensate and get rid of the remove top 3 row step, as we don't need it anymore. Alternatively, if someone has messed around with the report and removed the rows manually, then we need to go back into the report to put 3 blank rows in, because we still expect our system to be producing that report that's got the first 3 rows that we don't need in future. We're going to assume it's option 1 and that the system report format has changed. It's annoying, but it does happen sometimes. So to fix it, we're going to remove from Power BI the remove top row step, and then everything will work fine. To do that, we'll go to the query settings pane and then go up to remove top row step, and then click on the little X next to remove top rows. Power BI warns us to say that if you delete this step, it could affect subsequent steps, and that could cause the query to break. That is true, but in this case, it's going to fix the query already having broken. Hurrah! Our error has now disappeared. Our number invoice title has returned. To sum up then, see what I did there? To sum up, the refresh errors like we've seen here will frequently, but not always, happen when an object like a column name or a sheet name or a table name is explicitly included in the code for a step in our query settings pane. And then that object's name changes or the object disappears altogether. There are definitely other errors too, but these are the principal set. So we're going to click close and apply and get back to our report view. And there we go. Power BI has now sifted and sorted through our Power Query changes, refreshed the report, and generally waved everything on through. Well done, everyone. Tea and medals all round for sorting out that problem.